Hey, good morning, everyone. Happy Thursday morning to you, and welcome back to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I am the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. This is video number 4 in our study of the Olivet Discourse. Now, last 2 mornings, I've tried to set the context for you of Matthew chapter 24. I've suggested to you that it is inappropriate to ignore Matthew 23. It is the lead-in. It is the fountain, if you please, for Matthew chapter 24. Jesus predicted that the judgment on Jerusalem and the destruction of the temple would occur in that generation. Now, it is that background that leads us to the reality of what happened. Jesus had just predicted, in other words, that Jerusalem and the temple was going to be destroyed in that generation. And it would be during the feast days, as I discussed yesterday. That prediction was absolutely stunning to the disciples. Now, I have to say a word here, and I may develop it in a separate video. I don't know, but it's so critical to understand this. So many people today absolutely fail to grasp and to comprehend the significance of that temple. And there are many reasons for that. One of the reasons, I'm sitting here trying to think, how do I condense this in just into a brief snippet? That Jerusalem temple was the very heart. It was the heartbeat of the Jewish nation. It was the very heart of their being. Israel viewed their election inextricably tied to the temple. Their marriage to Yahweh tied to the temple. Their election as a people tied to the people. The covenant, their covenant with Yahweh, tied to the temple. The kingdom of Israel tied to the temple. Not one theologically significant tenet in Israel's mentality was not related to the temple. The feast days, which regulated every aspect of their lives, tied to the temple. Now that's difficult for you and me as Westerners to grasp for the simple reason we're not oriented toward temples. We're not oriented to think in terms of covenant even, as the very foundation of our life, as the very reason for our existence, and as the identity of us as a corporate people. We're not trained to think that way. Oh, now we may have some tangential relation to that by thinking, okay, we have the Constitution of the United States that identifies us as Americans. Okay, that's getting there a little bit. Still doesn't strike at the heart and the core of the importance of covenant to Israel. And so here we have the temple. That is the place, it's the only place that the feast days can be celebrated. It's there that the Day of Atonement, which is her salvation for the taking away of her sin. And as a Jewish scholar friend of mine recently said, since the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70, Israel has had no atonement. One rabbi, after the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70, said, since the fall of Yahweh's temple, there has been nothing but curse for our people. The dew has not fallen. The sun has not shined. Another rabbi said, since the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70, a steel and iron wall has been erected between heaven and earth. Now, it's important for us to understand this. All right? Would you and I be shocked, disturbed, if someone were to say, well, the Washington Monument is going to be destroyed in this generation? Obviously we would, because of the implications of that. But I would suggest to you that we still would not grasp the power of that prediction and everything that it meant, everything that it implied. I mean, after all, terrorists destroyed the 2 towers in New York. America did not fall. The Constitution was not destroyed. The nation continued. The people continued. But you see, to the Jewish mind, the destruction of the temple, the destruction of the city meant something beyond simple conflict and war and conquest. They knew from the Old Testament scriptures, they knew that in the last days, God was going to destroy that city and that temple to create the Messianic kingdom, the Messianic temple. They knew that Jesus had been announcing to them that the end of the age was coming, and in their lifetime. That was a good news and a bad news reality. You know, I was going to talk about something entirely different on this program, but I really feel like it's so critical for us to understand how important the fall of Jerusalem really was. For 1,500 years, Israel had stood as God's elected, chosen, exclusive people. Oh, other nations were invited in if they wished, but Israel remained the core, the foundation. You know, in several formal public debates, I have had my debate opponents tell me, who would have cared if Jerusalem was destroyed? It's nothing but a hotbed of rebellion. It was nothing but, a hotbed of seditious people. The Gentiles would have rejoiced over the destruction of those troublesome people in their temple, and it had absolutely no theological, spiritual significance. You know, the men who have made those kind of statements simply do not understand God and Israel and the covenant. They have no clue, literally. I'm not trying to be unkind. But according to the Old Testament, when the old covenant was removed, when the old system was removed, then and only then would salvation for the world come to full bloom. And so, was the fall of Jerusalem significant? I want to tell you something. I just produced this week, actually published just this week, a brand new Kindle-only book. I haven't put it in book form yet. That is to say, in paperback form. If you prefer paperback, let me know. I'll consider that. But anyway, I published just this week a Kindle book entitled The Gospel of Destruction. In Matthew 24:14, Jesus said, as he predicted the fall of Jerusalem and the temple, he said, this gospel, not the gospel, more broadly considered, but this gospel of the kingdom, this good news of the kingdom, must be preached in all of the world as a witness to the nations, then comes the end. How could Jesus call the fall of Jerusalem and the destruction of Jerusalem good news? How could he call it this good news? Well, get a copy of that Kindle book and you'll understand. But for our purposes today, you have to see that it was both a horrible bit of news, but it was also good news. For the Jews, it was the most horrific news possible because it meant the end of their old covenant, their exclusive relationship with God. It meant now, they were no longer God's elect. And that's powerful stuff. Next week, all right, Monday, I'll get back to what I was actually going to talk about this morning, and that is, why did the disciples, upon hearing Jesus' prediction of Jerusalem and the temple, why did they immediately start showing him the size and the beauty and the glory of that temple? It is because they understood how important it was. Whether or not modern commentators do, they knew how important it was. And it struck at the very core of their being. It shocked them. It dismayed them. And so they asked their questions. And their questions serve as the key to understanding the Olivet Discourse. Now, on tomorrow's video, we will continue our examination, review, and refutation of Brock Hollett's book, Debunking Preterism, and we will be addressing some more of his claims concerning the Olivet Discourse. You certainly don't want to miss that. So we'll see you on the flip side.